Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, the owner of the Grand Willow Hotel, had been hearing troubling whispers. Several emails had reached her office, guests complaining about how they were treated. One message read, "If you don't look rich, they treat you like you don't belong." Mrs. Whitmore had built the hotel from nothing after her late husband passed away. Kindness and respect were values she had insisted on from the very first day, but clearly something had changed. So she decided to find out the truth herself. The next morning, she wore an old coat, simple flat shoes, and tied her hair under a faded scarf. She took a taxi and asked the driver to drop her off a block away. She walked the rest of the distance carrying a small worn handbag. Inside the hotel lobby, a few well-dressed guests were checking in. Mrs. Whitmore stepped up to the front desk. The receptionist barely glanced at her. "Can I help you?" the woman said in a flat, impatient voice. "Yes," Mrs. Whitmore replied gently. "I'd like a room for the night." The receptionist looked her up and down, clearly unimpressed. "All our rooms are expensive," she said coldly. "You might want to try the motel down the street." A couple standing nearby glanced over awkwardly. Mrs. Whitmore kept her calm. "I understand," she said politely, "but I would still like to book a room." The receptionist sighed loudly and rolled her eyes. "Look, if you can't afford it, don't waste our time." One of the attendants whispered loudly to another staff member, loud enough for Mrs. Whitmore to hear. "She probably just wants to sit in the lobby and use the Wi-Fi." They both laughed. Mrs. Whitmore felt a quiet sadness settle in her chest. The complaints had been true. Without saying another word, she turned and walked out of the lobby. She pulled out her phone and called the hotel manager. "I want an urgent staff meeting in the morning," she said calmly. "Yes, ma'am," the manager replied nervously. The next morning, the entire staff gathered in the lobby. The receptionist stood behind the desk, whispering to the attendants. "Have you ever seen the owner before?" one of them asked quietly. "No," the receptionist replied. "I heard she's very rich and rarely visits." Everyone straightened their uniforms as they waited. Then the glass doors opened. The room fell silent. Walking slowly into the lobby was a woman wearing the same worn coat, faded scarf, and simple shoes from the day before. The receptionist's eyes widened in disbelief. The attendants looked at each other in shock. Mrs. Whitmore walked calmly to the front desk. She placed her handbag down and looked directly at the receptionist. The receptionist's hands began to shake. Ma'am, I didn't realize." Mrs. Whitmore straightened her scarf and looked at her quietly. "That," she said calmly, "is exactly the problem." She turned slowly and looked at the rest of the staff. "A hotel is not judged by how it treats wealthy guests," she said. "It is judged by how it treats everyone else." The lobby was completely silent. Mrs. Whitmore looked back at the receptionist. "You turned away a guest without even asking her name. You mocked someone who only asked for a room." The receptionist lowered her head. Mrs. Whitmore then looked at the attendants who had laughed the previous day. "And you," she said, "found it amusing." They could not meet her eyes. "Your employment here ends today," Mrs. Whitmore said firmly. The manager nodded and quietly escorted them away, while the rest of the staff stood frozen. Mrs. Whitmore faced the remaining employees. "This hotel was built on respect," she said. "Every person who walks through these doors deserves dignity, whether they arrive in a limousine or on foot.